that we are all awake.
Tonight at 8 Eastern on C-SPAN's Q&A. Washington Journal continues.
John Koufos, we describe this as a redemption story. It is Easter Sunday. You're involved in an organization called Right on Crime, which is what?
So Right on Crime is a division of the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and it is a conservative-leaning think tank prioritized on public safety. So the idea here is I'm sure many of your viewers have heard about in Texas. Texas led the way, closing about 8 prisons since 2005. The crime rate also went down through smart criminal justice reform. So Right on Crime was a big piece of that. Today, Right on Crime has offices here in D.C., which I'm privileged to work at, and state directors around the country, helping states put together smart criminal justice reform that prioritizes public safety, prioritizes victims, and then prioritizes workforce development and ways to get people back on track.
8 years ago, June of 2011, what happened?
So June 2011 was the end of my battle with alcoholism and almost the end of someone's life. I was driving drunk, a 20-year battle with alcoholism, and I hit somebody driving home drunk one night, and then I tried to lie my way out of it. I left, and...
You left the scene of the accident?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I left the scene of the accident. I tried to lie my way out of it for about 4 days. And when I cleared up, I went and turned myself in and thanked the Lord that that person lived. It's something that haunts me every day, something candidly, I do this work not because I can't find another job. I do this work because this is daily atonement for me. Consistent with what Right on Crime does, I look at it as if we can put the intervention first, we save tomorrow's victim. Right? So if you're an alcoholic, if you have an opioid addiction, if you have other issues, if we can solve that, we can save the next victim. So I'm very blessed that I didn't kill anyone. And you know what? That was purely by the grace of God.
If you've had any experience with the criminal justice system, we want to hear from you. We're dividing our phone lines a little bit differently. 202-748-8002 for those of you who've had experience in the justice system. Otherwise, we're dividing our phone lines regionally. 202-748-8000 for those here in the East Coast, and those in the Mountain and Pacific time zones. 202-748-8001. You went to jail for how long?
I was sentenced to 6 years. New Jersey has a parole system, so I was paroled after 17 months. And then did another 3 years on parole. So I was at a place called Bayside State Prison, which is actually, when I was practicing law, that was the place that my clients were afraid to go to, and I represented, murder cases, organized crime cases, etc. So it was an eye-opening experience, one I put myself in, one I deserve to be in. I make no excuses for what I did, nor do I call my sentence unfair or anything like that. It was also a place where I saw both the, believe it or not, the very best in some people, and of course the very worst. It is prison. You
were also disbarred. Was that fair?
Well, I think minds will disagree. So the Disciplinary Review Board in New Jersey actually voted to not disbar me, to suspend me for only 3 years in a 6-2 decision. The New Jersey Supreme Court, by one vote, voted to disbar me. So I guess in the political atmosphere of the time, right, I won the popular vote but lost the votes that matter. But I look at it like this. Without that disbarment, I never would have been on the path I'm on. I would have probably gone back to practicing law and, and been back into my old, at least my old career, not my old personal life. So I think that I would have liked to see it go differently, but it didn't, and here we are.
During that time in prison, what were the days like for you?
So prison is like watching a clock that never moves. So, the lights go on at 5:30 or 6 in the morning count, and then all you're trying to do is to get to the next movement or the next meal until the day is over. But, whereas, you and I will chat here for an hour and it will go by like that. When you're in prison, an hour feels like, like the clock has never moved, right, for many hours. So one of the things that you do, you try to better yourself where you can. Some prisons are better at it than others. For me, I was a janitor in the center building at Bayside State Prison. So I did my mornings mopping floors there. I was also a janitor in college, so I returned to my roots in some ways. And in in that way, I worked on myself where I could. We had some limited alcohol programming, some limited other programming, and I had a lot of time to read, reflect, and to think candidly. But it's prison, so it's general population, so you have to dodge fights, you have to dodge all the drugs and alcohol that are on the tier, you have to dodge gang activity. So there's a survival mechanism, of course.
And how did you do that? What carried you through?
So I got to tell you, I had some great people on the outside. I don't have much of a family, but I had some great friends who sent me a lot of letters, visited me a lot. A lot of lawyer friends came visited. Also because, so for me, I was a criminal defense lawyer. I was an NAACP lawyer in Central Jersey. So for me, the inmates weren't really a problem for me in most of the cases, right? So the guards, not all of them agreed with my former life as a defense lawyer, and they let me know that. Some more forcefully than others, but I got to tell you, I really didn't have problems with too many inmates, but the system's difficult. You get singled out. Listen, you never want to be a high-profile guy in prison, right? You want to fly under the radar. That was never going to happen. I had tried murder cases all over the state.
And the president signing what was called the First Step Act. You were at the White House for the ceremony. Let's just watch a portion of that.
My name is John Koufos, and I have the blessing of being the National Director of Reentry Initiatives at Right on Crime. Alcoholism sent me to prison. I was in the throes of addiction years ago, and then I was able to find sobriety, get clean. Ms. Rollins gave me a job helping out in Texas with reentry initiatives. Jared and Ivanka have been so wonderful here to me to put this policy forward. And I want to tell you, Mr. President, what this is going to lead to jobs. We're going to make folks job ready, right, to respond to the record low unemployment. We're going to make sure that people who may have not been contributing to taxes or paying taxes, they're going to redeem their lives and they're going to be reunified with their family. God bless you and thank you.
Very much. I appreciate it.
From the Oval Office, and what did that feel like, having been in prison and then being in the Oval Office with the President of the United States?
It's surreal. This whole experience has been surreal, blessed. I think the president needs to be commended for his courage on criminal justice reform. And listen, it's not exactly the most popular thing, number one, to do it in your first term. It's politically sensitive to do that. Number two, to embrace people who have been to prison with open arms, who are willing to be part of the solution. And I think that what the president's done here has made it so all of us feel like we can have an opportunity, right? And importantly, the First Step Act responds to a number of things that went wrong in the 90s, in the Clinton crime bill, that have gone wrong in states across this country. For me personally, to go from prison to helping build reentry programs for 5 of the former governors in New Jersey, to then touching the Resolute desk and having an opportunity to talk to President Trump afterwards off camera was a blessing that can only happen in sobriety and a blessing that can only happen in service.
This bill will do what?
A number of things. There's a prison reform end and a sentencing reform end. On the prison reform end, the bill does things like make sure good time credits actually happen as prescribed, 54 days a year. It allows certain nonviolent offenders to go to pre-release custody where they can receive services. So the way the current system works is you essentially do 85% of any number you get in the federal system, well, pre-First Step Act, and then you go out to supervised release. This allows pre-release custody so you can acclimate to the community faster. On the sentencing reform side, it remedies some of the problems of the old crack cocaine sentencing disparity, where you receive so much more time if you were convicted of a crack offense than a cocaine offense. This allows retroactive resentencing applications to remedy that issue. It also allows for the safety valve. Safety valve gives judges in certain situations more ability to exercise their discretion for certain offenders, right, rather than be handcuffed by mandatory minimums. In addition, that pre-release custody ties in with job training programs and productive activities. So that way we make sure that people are incentivized to get programming, get treatment, and get their lives back together.
As part of the debate, of course, the president signing the bill into law. Here's Senator John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana, opposing this legislation, which ultimately passed and is now the law.
I believe that the primary goal of a criminal justice system is not deterrence. It's an important goal, but it's not the most important goal. Nor is retribution, nor is rehabilitation. Rehabilitation, deterrence, retribution are important goals of the criminal justice system, but they're not the most important. The most important goal of a criminal justice system for most Americans is justice. Again, that's not to say deterrence and rehabilitation aren't important, but they go to the effectiveness of your penal system. They have nothing to do with justice. And that's what we try to do here in the United States Congress when we establish rules for sentencing criminals.
John Koufos, as you hear that, it's justice. It's not retribution. It's not rehabilitation.
Well, I think that's somebody's definition of justice, right? I think that we have to look at the reality of this system. It costs us, $70–80 billion a year to lock people up. 95% of every single inmate in the country right now is coming home. 95%. Some have that even higher. So if we know that 95% of everyone locked up is coming home, if we know that we have a traditionally half to 2/3 fail rate, depending on where you go, right? We know that we have to take a different approach. And all of us want the same thing. We want the streets safer, We want people working. We want people reunifying with their family, paying child support, etc., getting their lives back together. If we know that what we've been doing for so many years has produced result X and we do nothing else, well, that doesn't make any sense at all. That sounds like a very, very foolish endeavor.
Our guest is John Koufos. Excuse me, John Koufos. He is the National Director of the Reentry Initiatives for the organization called Right on Crime. Let's get to your phone calls. Valdez is joining us from Mapleton, Illinois. Good morning.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I'm a bit more cynical than you are, Mr. Koufos. I'm not as optimistic because I worked in law enforcement from 1981 to 2003 in California. And back then, they weren't called opioid addicts or anything like that. They were called hypes and junkies. And what is different, this reform that people now are on board with, is because we see a changing demographic of people going to jail. Back then, it was brown, black, and poor whites. And you talk about federal crime when the majority of people sentenced are in state statute courts, and they're doing state time. And that's a whole lot different than doing fed time. And so if they're going to have reform, I'm going to hold judgment until I see who it affects, because my guess is this reform that we're all talking about now is to keep suburban people out of jail, because they're the ones affected by this, quote, opioid epidemic, which actually is just a felony crime. And to be consistent, the law and order types should be screaming for those people to be in prison.
Valdez, thanks for the call. We'll get a response.
Well, first of all, thank you for your service in law enforcement. And you are correct. Most of the folks are locked up in state facilities, as I was. I did state time as well. And Right on Crime has state directors across the country to respond to smart criminal justice reform in different states. With respect to who's getting locked up, I think that, look, theories of crime have evolved, right? Of course, back when you were in law enforcement, sir, yes, it was lock everyone up. Everyone who does drugs is a junkie, and let's just throw away the key. But that clearly doesn't make sense. And candidly, I'm living proof of a guy who was an alcoholic, and although I went to prison and deserved to go to prison, when I got treatment, my life changed for the better. I'm married. I have a great job. And I'm sitting here on C-SPAN with Steve. So I think that if we continue to look at this as let's just lock up people who do drugs, there's a great saying a friend of mine, Mark Holden, always says, the war on drugs is over and drugs won. So I think we need to have a different take on this.
Our next caller from Texas, Thomas, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. Congratulations to you, John. I believe you deserve it.
Thank you.
I have two takes on the conversation today. Prison reform, or the overall umbrella of everything you're saying. My son is 47. Half his life has been in state prisons.
Why, Thomas?
I will say after all of that time, no skills, no recovery. He's back on the streets, literally. No success there. On the other side, my first cousin half of his life in the federal system, and I will give him credit. He has stayed clean. Overall, after visiting and seeing inside the prisons, it's just for profit. It's a money-making deal, and yes, it does keep the crap off the streets.
Hey, Tom, let me jump in to talk about your son for just a moment. What should have been done that wasn't done during his time in state prison?
Like John said, they watch the clock. They do menial jobs, really no training. Drug recovery or alcohol recovery programs are there, and actually my boy did find success in that, only because he was lazy and didn't want to go to the trouble to hustle for drugs, cigarettes, or booze, whatever. He got out, and he's still the lost puppy. At 47, it's a little late to be a puppy. I would say prisons, they're for profit. It depends on which prison. I do know there's some good ones. There's some Christianity in some of these prisons. I have friends that actually go mentor and preach and do 12-step. God bless them all. Overall, I do not see prisons doing anything, but in the big picture, as we wish they would. I like the political aspects of reform. Who wouldn't? But it's not going to happen because it's too profitable. There's too much money being made behind the bars. And there's some good guys that probably do deserve to get out. There's some good guys that don't deserve to be there. We know that. You got to change laws. You got to change that. And they're trying to do that. I love President Trump. He's jumping in. God bless any of you that jump in and try to do something positive. But you made a distinguishing difference between state prisons and federal. Absolute, total difference. You do not want to go to a federal prison. Absolutely not.
Hey, Tom, thanks for sharing your story. Good luck to your son. I hope he finds the right path, and we appreciate you adding your voice to the conversation.
And feel free to reach out to me. As you know, Right on Crime's based in Austin, Texas. We're doing a number of initiatives in Texas, and maybe we can find some help for him. You know, just to respond quickly to what you said about the lack of services in prison, you know, when I was in New Jersey, I was lucky to watch Chris Christie close Mid-State Correctional, which is actually where I went to prison first before Bayside. He closed Mid-State Correctional and turned it into a full drug treatment facility. So inmates could get the same treatment they would get on the streets inside a prison. So I think that we're seeing this pop up in Michigan. We're seeing vocational villages. You know, in South Carolina, they have a great something called Manning Reentry Center, Reentry Prison, where folks are coming out with services. So the tide is changing, but perhaps a little slow, but we're getting there. And I look forward to hearing from you about your son. And we just had the website. It's also linked to our website at cspan.org if you want to get more information. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, a look at America's prison population, now estimated to have the world's largest prison population, 2.2 million people behind bars, and that's a 1.9 million increase since 1972. Our next caller is from New Jersey. Dale, good morning, with John Koufos here in Washington.
Good morning. I would like to thank you for taking this call, and I also want to congratulate our New Jersey guy, John Koufos, for doing such amazing work and representing our state. As an activist here in the state of New Jersey, I want to say that prison reform has been a blessing here in 2019. I am in awe in watching this remarkable work being done. I worked with so many people over the last 21 years to get to this part. And so I just want to commend you, John, for representing our state.
Thank you.
And you keep fighting to make these changes on the policy level. It is important to change the laws, the sentencing laws, for so many. Family reunification is so important.
That's right.
And my beloved, we must look at ourselves as people who have been incarcerated, not inmates, not ex-convicts, not fellows. I think it brings empathy to the work that we do when you are looked at as a person who has been in prison, John Koufos. Thank you, C-SPAN.
Dale, thank you. And a quick look at what is in the First Step Act. It reduces mandatory sentencing guidelines for certain drug felonies. It allows judges greater latitude in sentencing nonviolent drug offenders. It reduces mandatory minimum sentences in a number of cases, makes retroactive the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010, and expands the prison employment programs.
That's right. And those are all major things, right? So every one of those things has a public safety outcome. What it also does is it forces a risk assessment when a person gets into the Bureau of Prisons that classifies them in certain ways. And really importantly, and often overlooked, is a dyslexia assessment. You know, thanks to Senator Cassidy and his efforts, you know, dyslexia is a huge issue in the prison system now. It's misclassified as illiteracy, and obviously your success in every other vocational program, if you can't read, is obviously going to be limited at best. So there's a lot of great stuff in this bill. The Bureau of Prisons and Department of Justice are working on implementing it. They've been kind enough to invite people like myself to talk about those issues, to have different listening sessions. So I got to tell you, I'm really encouraged with what I see. And just going back to the first caller for a second, where he talked about the issue being in the states, and he's 100% correct. I think that one of the real powers of the First Step Act is that we're seeing other states follow that lead, right? Florida has something pending called the Florida First Step Act. Other states around the country are doing similar things. So we're seeing other states, instead of a race to the bottom as it might have been in the 90s to who can be harsher, we're seeing who could be smarter on crime. And I think a lot of that, I think the catalyst for that was President Trump and the First Step Act.
But let me go back to something that the caller talked about, and that is if you're in prison and you know you're going to be out in 1, 3, 5, 7 years, why is it so difficult to retrain these inmates to make sure that they can get back into the workforce and not end up back in prison 2, 3, 4 years after they leave?
Well, I don't know that it is that difficult. I just think that it has.
Is it a cost factor?
I think it is a mission factor. I think some departments of corrections view their mission as safety and security, right? We're here to keep the inmates safe. They don't kill anyone. They don't kill themselves. Many prisons have not seen themselves as part of the broader public safety system, where if we fix what's going on in the prison, then we get better inmates or better people, thanks to our friend Gail in New Jersey, better people coming out. But we're seeing that change as well. And I use Michigan again. Michigan has whole vocational villages designed precisely for this purpose. There's a great nonprofit called The Last Mile, run by a dear friend, Beverly Parenti, and her husband, Chris Redlitz, are behind it. Giants in the tech industry, and they're teaching coding at San Quentin, coding in Indiana prisons all over, giving inmates real life skills, right? Part of the STEM economy. So we're seeing these job training programs pop up. I had the pleasure in New Jersey, thanks to our chairman of the board, was Jim McGreevey, former Governor McGreevey, and his relationships with the unions, as well as thanks to the Motor Vehicle Office and my friends in the State Bar. We developed a program which restored over 400 driver's licenses in the 3 years I ran the program. And thanks to Jim, what we were able to do is get so many of those folks into the building trade unions. So you had folks who never had a driver's license now going on to become laborers and carpenters. And that shows what's possible in today's world with just a little bit of tweaking.
If you've had experience in the criminal justice system, or perhaps if you've served time in a federal or in a state prison, we would love to hear from you. Our phone number for that line is 202-748-8002. CJ is next, joining us from Richfield, Minnesota. Good morning.
Good morning to you, and happy Easter to all. Thank you for letting me get a chance to get in on this. Back in the day when President Obama went into the prison system, he was the first sitting president to ever go into a federal penitentiary. And Democracy Now! Covered the story for the whole 2 weeks he was in there. But when I heard it on the mainstream, it went like this: President Obama is releasing deadly criminals back onto society, and that was it. What was your take on how it was handled when Obama did it versus Trump? Thank you for letting me get that in.
CJ, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think the first thing is when you say Obama did it, when President Obama did go into the prisons, yes, and he did commute some sentences, many sentences, towards the very end of his term. What President Obama was not able to do was to get meaningful criminal justice reform off the ground. And that could be for a number of factors. So, yes, President Obama did grant clemency to many, many people on his way out the door. And that's common with presidents and governors around the country, right? We see them issue pardons, issue clemency, or tackle things like criminal justice, 25 seconds before they leave office, because then it's politically safe and expedient. And I think that alone should tell you what we're seeing right now. When we're seeing the White House get out in front of this issue, when they have an election coming up in 18 months, out in front of this issue when it's not the political playbook, I think should give some insight into Jared Kushner's dedication to the issue, the president's dedication to the issue, Senator Booker in my home state, his dedication to the issue, for making sure so much of that sentencing reform got in with Dick Durbin and some folks. So I think that's probably the best response to it. What I hope the result of this is we saw President Obama grant many clemencies on the way out the door. We're seeing President Trump now do criminal justice reform like it's never been done in the first term. Let's hope that this is the positive momentum to get us where we need to go in this country.
Amy is next. Thank you for waiting. Orange Park, Florida. Good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to ask a question about for-profit prisons. I'm in North Florida, and I have a friend. My best friend is from South Georgia, and her nephew has a problem with addiction. His mother died, and his father was also an addict, and he's in his mid-20s, so he spent his time in and out of prison. He's currently in a facility, I guess, that serves the Brunswick, Georgia area. But in this for-profit prison, they not only take money from the government, but also the prisoners. She was telling me just the other day that they charge $5 for a pack of ramen noodles. And I asked her, I said, well, do you mean like a package of many packs of ramen noodles? And she said, no, just for one pack of ramen noodles, they charge $5. And this is repeated through any other services they provide. If they let them use the phones or the internet, their families have to pay these exorbitant fees, which most people in prison are already poor. And another question I wanted to ask about, not just the profits that these private prisons make off of people, but the lockup quotas. I read a statistic recently that 2/3 of private prisons have these lockup quotas. They are contracts with the state, and the average lockup quota is 90%. I think here in Florida we have a 90% lockup quota.
Amy, I'm going to stop you there. You put a couple of important issues on the table, and this seems to be a theme, these for-profit prisons. Your response?
Sure. So first and foremost, I don't have a lot of expertise in private prisons. I was locked up in a public prison. I can tell you it wasn't the Hilton. So I always tell people I don't understand how much worse a private prison could have been from a facilities perspective. What I can say is we know that most of the folks in private prisons today they're on ICE holds. That's the overwhelming majority of where private prisons are. Where private prisons are serving a state prison function, the caller talked about the price of ramen noodles. So that's canteen or called commissary, right? Every private and public prison has that. The amounts to buy food in prison are too high anyway, whether you're in a private prison or a public prison. As far as the lockup quotas, I'm not familiar with that. What I've heard and what I've seen are you have rates in the contract that give you a set amount whether you have that many inmates or not. I'll give you an example. In New Jersey, we ran a parole day reporting center called a community resource center. In that community resource center, whether we had 40 parolees in there, or 40 people on parole there, or whether we had one person on parole there, we got the same amount either way, because that's the only way it's profitable for anyone to get involved in even doing the service and providing the service. So I got to tell you, I just don't know enough about private prisons, but some of the things that the caller mentioned, the cost of phone calls through the roof, the cost of commissary also through the roof, that's something I've seen in public prisons as well.
The website is rightoncrime.com. You can also follow them on Twitter. And Dave is next, Charleston, South Carolina. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Steve. It's been a while. Happy Easter to those celebrating the day. If as far as private prisons, if you follow the money, you can see what it is. Dick Cheney is invested in private prisons. There was a situation in Pennsylvania a few years ago where a judge and a prosecuting attorney actually were in cahoots to get people locked up for minor offenses because they had stock in the prison involved. As far as the drug war goes, the drug war has been a cash cow for state and local governments. They get a large amount of their money from fines levied against people for minor drug offenses. I think under an ounce is like $1,200 fine. You multiply that by several hundred people a month, you're pulling in some money. Now, the whole issue of crime and punishment is rich, powerful people make mistakes. Poor people display criminal tendencies, Steve.
John Koufos, your response.
You know, and one thing that I take from that is the fines and fees issue. And he's right in the sense that fines and fees are exorbitant in this world. I can tell you that when I talked about those 400 driver's licenses that we restored, almost all of them were for unpaid fines and fees. And we're not talking about, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. We're talking about a $200 ticket, a $50 ticket someone couldn't pay. It becomes a warrant. The person gets arrested again, and the cycle continues. So the fines and fees issues is something that Right on Crime and many other thought leaders are working on. In New Jersey, we dealt with it through the legal community, but Chief Justice Rabner just dismissed 789,000 old tickets, old parking tickets, old fines, and old fees in response to this problem. We've seen the same in Michigan before the former governor went out the door. So he is correct in the sense that fines and fees, to the extent we're trying to help people re-enter society, it's a huge barrier because it's a barrier to getting identification. And if you can't get identification or a driver's license, what are you going to do?
The day you walked out of state prison, what were you thinking?
I think the very first thing I was thinking is when do I get the chance to apologize to my victim?
Did you?
I had a parole condition, no contact. I wasn't permitted to try. I was able, by the way, when I was on bail, I was only allowed to talk to their lawyer privately on the phone, and I did for about an hour. And that was the best I could do. When I got off parole, I'll tell you, once I had the certificate in hand in 2016, I called that lawyer again and said, listen, I'm still here. I'd like to apologize. There's no excuse for what I did. And I want the person in the family to hear it from me. She was very kind, said she'll pass the message along. And then I called again about 6, 7, 8 weeks later. No response, and that's their right. I mean, I injected myself into their world, nearly killing, you know, this kid was 17 at the time, actually. Nearly killed this poor guy who was doing nothing but walking down the street. There's no excuse for what I did.
He has recovered.
From what I'm told, from parole in New Jersey. But he was so badly injured that I don't know. So for someone like me, and this is timely with Easter, so I was a guy who blamed God for everything that went wrong in my life. My father, a federal fugitive. My mother, you know, was a very young mother. We had those issues going on in the house, a lot of addresses. I was pulled around the country when my dad was a fugitive, living under assumed names for a period of years. And none of that, by the way, is an excuse for what I did. I'm just giving you context. And, you know, every time something went wrong in my life, I blamed God. Every time something went right in my life, won a trial, did something great career-wise, etc., it was obviously all John, right? That's alcoholic thinking, right? And that's not smart thinking. And when it is so sad that it took me nearly killing somebody and watching that person recover when they candidly shouldn't have recovered. I looked at the medicals myself and did many cases in this context. That person should have died. And the fact that they didn't, if you didn't believe in God before, you better now. And that was really the crystallizing moment in my life that got me to therapy, that got me to sobriety, and got me hopefully living a life of atonement. And if the person wants to hear an apology 20 years from now, I'm there. If they never want to hear an apology, that's their right. You know, one of the things we see now is there's a lot of people like me who have victims who don't care in the prison system. There are, but there's so many that do. I'm really encouraged by when we see Van Jones. Van Jones has a new show coming out called The Redemption Project, which speaks directly to these issues. They take people who have hurt others and their victims and bring them together to to show a different perspective of healing. And I hope to have the privilege to apologize to my victim one day.
The organization is Right on Crime. Our guest here in Washington, John Koufos, who serves as the National Director of the Reentry Initiatives. Melanie in Covina, California. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
How are you doing this week? How are you doing this morning?
Wonderful. Happy Easter. I hope you're having a blessed holiday.
Having a better day today than I was yesterday. So my question to you would be, why do you think there's such an indifference between women's prison and men's prison?
That's a great question. You know, I think, first of all, we've seen an explosion in the amount of women being incarcerated in this country in the last few years. So I think part of it is that. I think the other part is the system has been built for the majority of inmates, which are men, right? But they don't take into account some of the really specific problems that women face between family reunification, between medical issues, different products, and, you know, even shackling, right? The first setback, one of the things it did was ban shackling of pregnant women, which seems like it would be a no-brainer. But no, we're just coming to that. I think that, you know, having been to prison myself, visited prison on many sides, and I've been to women's prisons visiting as well, you know, I remember visitation in a male prison, and there were full of women visiting men. When you go to a women's prison, very, very few men visiting women. It's grandmothers, it's aunts, there's a real drop-off in connectivity to services for women and the unique challenges that women face in the criminal justice system. And I'm inspired by seeing states now picking that up and trying to make more specific programming for women.
Oliver from St. Petersburg, Florida. Thank you for waiting. Good morning.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your taking my call this morning. I have a brother who has served so far 27 years in federal prison. He's currently at USP Hazleton, West Virginia.
On what charges, Oliver?
He was for a nonviolent drug offense. Mm-hmm. He was going to be released from prison by the USP Hazleton on compassionate release. The problem is that the state of Florida has a detainer on him from 1992 for a parole violation because they did not give him a chance for a parole hearing at that time. Now, he did have a hearing, what we call, he signed a waiver in absentia that let them go ahead and do a hearing without him being present. And the Florida Commission on Offender Review made a decision to bring him back to Florida to serve 24 more years in the state prison, which I think is very unfair.
Oliver, thank you for sharing your story. Does this sound familiar?
Sure. First of all, Hazleton, my heart goes out to you. USP Hazleton has a reputation as one of the worst places to be in the federal system. You know, anyway, as one of the worst reputations. I have old clients there.
Why?
So Hazleton is described as a dungeon. It's described as a very old prison, and the designation right away, all the USPs are of higher security classification than, say, your federal correctional institutions, federal correctional camps. So if starting from the bottom, right, you have like a camp, and then you have federal correctional institutions, then you'll have collaterally federal medical centers like Devon's in Massachusetts, and then USPs, United States Penitentiaries. Tucson, Atlanta, Hazleton, Leavenworth, right? Those are the kind of places where they typically send people with long sentences or who can't get along in another prison. You know, Hazleton, I always remember that as people writing me letters trying to help them get out of there. With respect to the detainer issue, this speaks directly to what's going on in today's prisons, is that people have all kinds of other things going on in the states. The prison knows that they have this going on, and no one's making an effort to resolve it. Not that I'm not allowed to give legal advice, given my disbarment, but I hopefully this gentleman's family member will then try to apply for credits when he has to serve his other sentence to try to have his federal sentence credited towards the parole violation sentence in the interest of justice. There is case law out there if he looks hard enough. But what I think is, and I'll tell you a personal story. So I came from a little place called Brick, New Jersey, maybe 100,000 people at the most, right? At one point, I was a public defender in the town early in my legal career. And when I got arrested, when I got sent to prison, my house had rocks on the lawn instead of a lawn. And then weeds started growing up through the rocks, right? So code enforcement officer writes a ticket to the house, which is, I guess, linked to me. I'm in prison. Everyone knows I'm in prison, by the way. And rather than connect with the prison to figure that out, they go and suspend my license, issue a warrant for my arrest for failing to appear in court. Because I have resources and friends in the court was why that got handled before I got out. So many of the things we dealt with in New Jersey and the New Jersey Reentry Corporation were dozens of things that could have been handled very easily while someone was locked up and just nobody bothered to do it.
Peter from Provincetown, Massachusetts with John Koufos. Good morning.
Good morning. Doing an excellent job, C-SPAN. Let me just step back a moment and talk about Chuck Colson, the late Chuck Colson. He was obviously someone who came out of Watergate and spent some time in prison and was watching, observing the recruitment, by radical Islamists of certain prisoners. Now, throughout this entire discussion, I don't sense that there is a way in which we can, sort of divorce the radical Islamists, from the rest of the criminal population in the prisons. It's something which, I've been scratching my head over ever since I opened up the Wall Street Journal and saw that Chuck Colson had, penned a op-ed in which he mentioned my name and mentioned the fact that, I had been one of the early ones to observe the same trend. Well, guess what? We moved on. We moved on.
Peter, thanks for the call. He also wrote the best-selling book, Born Again.
Well, Chuck Colson, his work lives on in Prison Fellowship, which is an amazing organization. For those of you not familiar with it, they worked so heavily on the First Step Act as well. Folks like Heather Rice-Minus and Craig DeRoche over there at Prison Fellowship. And I think Chuck Colson did his great work responded to a lot more than what the caller described. Chuck Colson's work has been redemptive across this country, as has Prison Fellowships. And the reason we have Second Chance Month, actually, and the president declared April Second Chance Month, was because of Prison Fellowship, which started with Chuck Colson. So we're all lucky to have them working in the prison to bring spirituality and rehabilitation to both state and federal, and soon federal inmates.
We'll go to Matthew in San Francisco. Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Koufos and C-SPAN, my phone. Kudos to you guys. I really appreciate the efforts and the fact you're bringing this to live TV this morning. I have direct experience as somebody with experience in the justice system. I was sentenced in May of 2017. I was a participant of CAP, C-A-P, Convictions Alternative Program here in the 9th District Court. Drug conviction, someone who had never touched a drug in my entire life until the age of 40. Because of that, I was looking at 10 to 20 and agreeing with the speedy trial and going through all that. I got that down to 4 to 6 years. And I spent time in a federal halfway house here in San Francisco, California. But because of the opportunities with reentry and what have you, I was sentenced to 3 years of federal probation. CAP, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, Mr. Koufos, Convictions Alternative Program. Basically, it's intensive supervision There's judicial oversight, first and third Thursday of every month. We meet up with a team of prosecutors, defense attorney, pretrial officers, our judge, which ends up being our sentencing judge. And I can't speak highly enough of it. I was a graduate, one of the first graduates of the program, and I have 1 year left on paper. And I participate right now. Here in San Francisco, we have an organization called Code Tenderloin, helping people with job readiness. And, for example, right now, our job readiness program is a month-long program. We meet 3 days a week at LinkedIn headquarters. They donate the space. We've worked with individuals that are in the halfway house. I am also in the program, in a residential program. And it's just an opportunity, allowing us. I mean, my participation, I'm all over the place right now because I'm really excited about what I'm seeing on TV right now. It was an opportunity to, judge, can I say judges' names online on
Sure,
air?
go ahead.
Okay, so Judge Charles Breyer was my initial sentencing judge, and because I agreed to a program in speedy trial, when I went to go get sentenced that day, Judge Breyer, he goes, it's a very difficult case. I've been doing this for 18 years, and I don't know what to do, and I'm supposed to know what to do. And he says, I'm convinced you're never going to sell drugs again, obviously my drug charge. I'm not convinced you're never going to do them again. Go get well, and we're going to pay for it. And at
That's
that
fair.
moment, right. And I started, my family's behind me. I had 17 years in public education. And like I said, I'd never done a drug before in my life. Through some circumstances, my partner, Mr. Koufos knows that my partner was killed by a drunk driver. And that was a tailspin for me because he was helping me. I had just recently come out, blah, blah, a lot of things. And when that happened, I really was resentful towards just life, and
Bottom line, Matthew, how are you doing today?
Today, life is great. I go back now and speak at the graduations for CAP. I was able to, like I said, participate in like different organizations that are helping me. I also participate in the wellness program. It's a nonprofit here in San Francisco, working with individuals that have mental illness, substance abuse problems, homelessness, and it works. Incarcerating individuals for drug charges or what have you is not the answer. Getting them the help and the resources they need, that's where we need to go. And I believe, Mr. Koufos, you said that. You've addressed that issue. How we do that and getting those resources, I'm lucky here in San Francisco that we're able to. It's still not enough, but we're able to at least help those or try to help those. And I'm definitely going to be looking into the Right on Crime organization and maybe reaching out to you.
Love to hear from you. And thank you so much for all that you're doing and for sharing your strength through some troubling times. And what you've really hit on, I think, is the importance of diversion courts, right? Mississippi, for example, just passed a law, thanks to the leadership of Governor Bryant, which adds diversion courts to their lineup of options. And diversion courts have worked really well in states around the country. New Jersey, again, Governor Christie made drug court mandatory for certain offenders. So drug court and diversion courts can be very powerful. They have veterans courts, right, which coded to our heroes who have served, who have very unique problems in the criminal justice system. So I'm so happy that you had the opportunity to get into a diversion program and you're making the most of that opportunity. And I look forward to hearing more from you.
And Matthew, thank you for sharing your story, and good luck to you. Really some incredible stories this morning from the calls.
Absolutely.
What's your takeaway?
I think that the viewers should realize that there's a lot of great people out there who are trying to get a second chance. People that would do anything for a second chance, but can't get out of the system. You know, sometimes when I would talk about the system, I remind people of the old Roach Motel commercials, right? You can check in, but you can't check out because you're sort of stuck on this flypaper between trying to get your life together, get a driver's license, report to parole, find housing, get job training. And I'm really inspired by what I've heard from people, and I'm inspired by what I'm seeing. I think that
criminal justice reform is the civil rights issue of our time. It is the justice issue of our time, and it's the prosperity issue of our time. And when we can see people as left as Van Jones standing with the president on this issue, and everyone in between, we see everyone come together on one thing, that's probably the right thing. And I'm blessed to be here with you, and I'm blessed to be hearing from them.
And if you want to get more information on John Koufos, a piece that he wrote for the New York Post back in December, the headline, Debunking the Lies About the First Step Act. Steve has been patient in Sierra Vista, Arizona. Good morning to you. Go ahead with your comment or question.
Good morning, and to those that are celebrating Easter, happy Easter to you. This gives me an opportunity to address the nation. Now, the whole problem with crime and prisons actually begins, we need to take a more intelligent approach at things. I've spent more than 10 years in prison myself, and having known that experience, I need to tell you first that long before I got locked up, I was trying to find an agency to give me help to deal with my problems. And because I didn't have insurance money or, was white poor, you couldn't, I could not obtain any kind of what's called preventative care, if you will. So I ended up offending anyways, but I made a big point of that to the courts and to the therapy and all the things you get when you go inside.
Did it make a difference, Steve?
Oh, definitely. I'm what you call a success story survivor. I haven't reoffended, don't plan to. I've learned my lesson and other lessons as well.
I'm going to stop him there because we're short on time, but your response.
Sure, and what his story amplifies is something that that we see all the time, right? It has to do with the social safety net. Shay Callie, who is a social worker and public health expert who works with us at Right on Crime and actually worked with me in New Jersey, she opened my eyes back in 2014 to the fact that if we increase the social safety net, the services like this gentleman was talking about, which presumably involve maybe mental health, addiction, housing, those basics, right? Where to find food. You're going to divert a whole bunch of people from the prison system in the first place. We're seeing law enforcement agencies come up with exciting crisis intervention teams where mental health professionals are paired with law enforcement to divert people into mental health treatment. So I think that's something that maybe is the second step of criminal justice reform, is increasing that pre-entry situation. What do we do to make sure you never go in the first place?
John Koufos with Right on Crime. Thank you for telling your story. Thanks for being with us here on C-SPAN. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And a reminder, C-SPAN 2's Book TV all day today this Easter Sunday, and C-SPAN 3's American History TV. A reminder, we're back tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 4 o'clock for those of you on the West Coast, and a simulcast on C-SPAN Radio. Among our guests will be Dennis Hayes. He is the co-founder of Earth Day, and our Monday roundtable with two authors, Anna Palmer of Politico, joined by Jake Sherman, who are the co-authors of The Hill to Die On, The Battle for Congress, and the Future of Trump's America. That's tomorrow morning. Thanks for being with us on this Easter Sunday. Wishing you and your family the very best. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a great week ahead.
Here's a look at what's coming up today on C-SPAN. News